back to another video. This was going to be my Christmas dress, but then it took way longer than I expected for it to get here. Let me show you the fabric first so we can brainstorm together. So this is the fabric. It's a really nice like tartan. It's a like polyester suiting from Minerva.com. They sent it to me for free in exchange for a post, and I have 3.5 meters of this. So originally I was going to be making, you guys know I love the Gertie's Ultimate Dress book. My idea was to make a basic bodice with a side pleated skirt. Actually, it was something like this. Like this was kind of the vibe that I was going for, like basic long sleeve, basic bodice, this skirt, and then probably not the collar unless I could make it detachable. But now that I'm actually looking at the fabric, that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is like a pinafore dress. Yeah, I want to do no box pleats, but this kind of vibe.
I started by tracing the pattern pieces of the bodice since I've not made this one before. To do that, I use white tissue paper, place it over the pattern pieces I need, and trace my size with a pencil, making sure to copy any markings and information that are on the pattern. And I also like to use a ruler for the straight lines to make sure that they're more accurate. Then I cut the paper pieces out just like any other pattern. All the patterns in this book include seam allowance, which is really nice.
I was just cutting out my pieces out of the tissue paper, and I did cut out the facings, but then I realized that if I want to do this sleeveless, so like as a pinafore, then I'm gonna have to finish the armhole somehow, and decided that the easiest way was to do a lining. And I was thinking about whether or not I had enough fabric for a lining, and it turns out I do. I have the perfect one here. I will link it below, as well as this one. And yeah, it matches perfectly. So I'm just gonna line the bodice. I'm not gonna line the skirt, obviously. So I think I'm gonna cut this out now, and maybe some of the fabric as well, and then be ready to start sewing tomorrow morning. Hello, it is now the next day, and I wanted to give you an update how far, where we're at right now. So I have cut all of the pieces out of the lining. Then I have also cut out all of my bodice pieces from our main fabric. Got my pocket, my skirt pieces, so pretty much ready to start sewing. I didn't have quite enough fabric at the skirt edge on both of them actually. But first of all, it's such a small amount that I think like this is pretty much the seam allowance. The skirt's gonna hang overnight once I finish sewing it, and I'm gonna like trim it anyway, so I'm not really fussed about it. And honestly, even if I have to trim a little bit more so that it's at that point, I'm okay with it. I thought about maybe pattern matching, but I quickly realized that the seams are curved on the bodice. I kind of went, whatever, I'm not going to, who cares? Yeah, if you care about pattern matching, this might not be the video for you. So today I am going to be testing out this thread that I got. So we got this thread in the advent calendar. So if you haven't seen that series, there's a whole playlist so you can watch them all in one go. And we got this thread, and I wasn't super stoked about it because it's red thread. It's not that exciting, but I am going to be testing it out because this is from their recycled polyester range. I suspect that it's going to be like exactly the same as regular polyester thread.
I started by pinning everything together that I can. This included the bodice backs and side backs, the bodice front and side fronts, the same for the lining, and then the pockets to the skirt pieces, all with right sides together. Princess seams can be a little intimidating at first. When I pinned my first princess seams a few years ago, I remember I spent the whole time thinking, this cannot be right. But it very much is a trust the process kind of thing. So make sure you have the notches or markers on both of your pieces and match them up first, and then pin out from there. It will feel really weird, especially in the more curved areas, but use a lot of pins. Take your time, and you will get it done. As for the recycled polyester thread, it behaves exactly like all Gutermann polyester thread I've tried so far. It has a slightly more like coarse feeling, but I only noticed that when I did hand sewing. I did have to switch the thread, but because my sewing machine was acting up and would only sew properly with the absolute cheapest and thinnest thread, which was very weird, but that turned out to just be my machine's way of asking for a deep clean and oil. I've then tried this thread on there again and it works absolutely fine. So if you want to use recycled thread instead of regular polyester Gutermann thread, I say go for it. Anyway, I went ahead and stitched all the seams that I had pinned and took special care around the princess seams to make sure that I was avoiding any kind of puckers or tucks. And then I pressed all my seams. The pocket seams I pressed towards the pockets in preparation for understitching, and all my bodice seams I pressed open after clipping the seam allowances. Next, I pinned the bodice backs and front together at the side seams with right sides together, but I'm leaving the shoulder seams until later so that I can have a seamless finish on the armholes. The finish that I kind of went for is pretty much what I did on my waistcoats I've done on the channel, like my hobbity waistcoat. And then obviously I'm doing the same for the lining. I'm also joining that at the side seams, but leaving the shoulder seams till later. But I put that to the side momentarily to finish the seams on my skirt. I'm serging them without removing any seam allowance. This fabric is a poly viscose suiting and it's a pretty loose weave, so it does fray quite a lot, and serging these seams is a must in my opinion. I'm also going to do the understitching on the pockets. Understitching is a line of stitches sewn close to the edge of a facing, lining, or pocket in this case, to keep said facing, lining, or pocket from rolling to the outside of the garment. So I make sure that my seam allowances are facing the pocket and I sew them to the pocket. Then I press the pocket in place and those stitches will be invisible but will help keep my pocket firmly in place. Next, I stitched the side seams of the bodice and bodice lining and pressed them open. I stitched my tag to the lining off camera, and now I'm ready to join the lining and the bodice. To do that, I'm going to pin the front and back necklines and the armholes, leaving my shoulder seams still open. I'm not doing the back opening seams because I still need to install the zipper, or the waistline seams because I'm still going to sew the bodice to the skirt. I will be finishing those seams off by hand. However, while I'm joining the bodice to the lining, I'm making sure that my seams are matching and that if there's any notches, that those are matching as well. Then I took that over to the machine and I stitched it in place, making sure to end my stitches at the seam allowance of the shoulder seams to make my life easier later. I like to keep my seam gauge close for these situations. After stitching, I flip the bodice to the right side out and press it all really neatly. I did forget to film that bit though. But yes, then it's finally time to sew the shoulder seams. I'm going to be stitching the outer fabric's shoulder seams and leaving the lining free. It might be useful to put a pin in the lining so it doesn't get caught up in there. Next, I trimmed the seam allowance and pressed, taking time to press the seam allowance of the lining to the inside. And then finally, I closed the seam by hand. I usually would be making the skirt and the bodice at the same time, but I was trying to get the bodice done so I could try it on and see if I needed any kind of major adjustments. So now that I had that done, I could actually get back to getting the skirt put together. I pinned the pockets and side seams together, making sure that I marked where I wanted the pocket to close on the outside, and then I stitched that all down before serging the pocket edges. Then it's finally time to attach the bodice to the skirt with right sides together, and I'm going to be leaving the lining free. At this point, I realized that my skirt pattern is a size 10 and my bodice is a size 8, so I need to make that work here and then remember to size down my skirt pattern later. I gave the skirt front a little box pleat, and at the back I even out the excess of the seam allowance. After stitching that seam, I did serge it to reinforce and trim it in one go. I left the dress to hang overnight, and the next day I picked out a zipper in the same red from my stash, only to then realize that it would be too small and then I was forced to have to decide what to do about it. I could go out and buy a bigger zipper, but that wasn't going to be easy since the fabric shops in my area are not tailored for garment sewing. I didn't want to order one online and have to wait 3 to 5 days for it, so I went rogue and used some of that regular zipper tape that you can buy by the meter that I had in my stash. I only had white, navy, or black, and I thought black would be the best option, so I went with that. My thought here was that if I could stitch it really close to the zipper teeth, it wouldn't be too noticeable. So I cut off a bit more than I thought I needed for the dress. I added the zipper pull, which is always a very tense moment for me, but it does seem that I'm getting better at it. And then I went about sewing this zipper just like I would stitch an invisible one. Once that was sewn in, I gave the back a good press and went ahead and pressed the seam allowance in on the lining along the back opening edges and the waistline. Then I closed the back seam of the skirt. And by the way, the secret to avoiding that weird bulge at the end of the zipper is to make sure that the stitching of the back seam of the skirt meets the stitching of the zipper to form a continuous line. After I pressed that seam open, I pinned the lining down along the back opening edges and the waistband so that I could close that up by hand. I want to get as close as possible to the zipper teeth, but not so close that my fabric or my stitches catch on the zipper. Okay, so I'm just obviously trying on the dress. I finished all of the hand sewing on the inside, and I'm not wearing anything. I think it's like a little bit roomy, but it's great. The waist is amazing, but I think like there's a little bit of like gaping here. I think it's just like a little bit big. This is gonna be a winter dress. I'm never gonna wear it with nothing underneath. I'm always gonna wear at least like a shirt, like a blouse, or a long sleeve t-shirt, maybe a turtleneck. And if it's a little bit roomy, it means I can wear actually maybe a bigger sweater under. This is fine for the purpose, but it is noteworthy for me to think about if I want to make this pattern for a dress that is more fitted, then I have to do some altering. It's time for me to go have lunch. I was also thinking that for the hem, we could try this stuff. This came in the advent calendar as well. And now I have to go put on some more clothes because I am quite cold now. Welcome to the floor. I apologize if there's some like background noise, but it's very humid today, so we have to have the dehumidifier on. I know that some of you commented some suggestions on how to even out my hem in other ways, like using a cardboard template and things like that, but I don't have any cardboard today at home, so I'm just gonna do what I always do. And what I always do is measure the shortest point of the skirt to the floor while the dress is on my dress form, and then pin that length all around the skirt using my tape measure. Then I moved to the desk and trim along those pins. In order to use that hemming web, I had to serge the raw edge of the skirt first, so I went ahead and did that. Then I followed the instructions on the back of the package. It told me to iron the coated side onto the inside of the hem in the wool or 2 dots setting. Then remove the backing paper and turn over the hem. And then it said that I had to place a damp cloth on top and press the iron on gradually. But I just used a lot of steam on my iron and it worked out fine. Okay, so we are done with the dress. I think it's so cute. I do think like the bodice needs a little bit of work. I'm sure you could tell in the reveal, but yeah, I like it. I really like it. I think now that I've actually put on layers underneath the dress, it fits much better, and I'm really excited to wear it. I kind of want to make another version and maybe plain
fabrics. I'm really excited about it. I love it. And honestly, I really like the zipper actually. That's something I should mention because like, okay, it's not the most invisible zipper ever because obviously it's not an invisible zipper. I honestly think it came out fine. It actually slides so cleanly and so satisfyingly, and it's a lot easier to like pull up and down by myself. And the other thing that I tried that I'm really excited to share with you is the hemming tape. I do think that because this is obviously a circle skirt, there was a lot of ease to ease in. So it's not perfect in some places. Like there's a little boop there, but it's, I mean, it's not even that visible. And when I'm actually wearing it and the skirt's like laying down or like hanging down, I guess, it doesn't really make a difference. It's nice and stiff. I'm really curious to see how it holds up in being washed, pressed, and stuff like that in the future. I don't think the finish is quite as clean and perfectly eased as it is with a bias binding or bias hem, but for the amount of time it took me to do, I'm really happy with it. Like I will be using this again. I think it's absolutely perfect, like game changer for straight seams. So yeah, I guess I have this year's Christmas dress already made. So now I just have to wait for Christmas to come back around. Let me know your thoughts on this dress and maybe other suggestions of things I could make on the channel that you would like to see me do or talk about, etc. I would also like to remind you to consider subscribing to my channel if you have not done that already. It would mean a lot to me. And also maybe consider following me on Instagram and TikTok. I will leave all of those linked below so you can go and check them out. I also want to thank Minerva for sending me this fabric. I enjoyed it a lot. It was really easy to work with. That's it for everything I have to say for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you in the next one. Bye!